Mass shootings in 24 hours, folks. One in Michigan at a Mormon church. One in Texas at a casino. This morning in New Orleans. Yesterday, 2 in South Carolina and another one in Louisiana. And let's be clear, as I was researching all of this, the search engine was taking off some of these shootings. When you search, the links are no longer taking you to the websites. And I really wish I had gotten a screen grab of this, but I typed in the search bar, mass shootings in the last 24 hours. They gave me 6 of them, like I just told you here. I clicked over to the news tab, absolutely no information about it. So I clicked back to the search tab, and then all of a sudden, only 4 were showing up. Information is actively being kept from us, guys.
There was another shooting this morning in Michigan at a Mormon church. The shooter is down. The church was set on fire. Don't know how many people were injured. They're not releasing the name of the shooter. Something tells me that's politically motivated as well. This is just going to become commonplace, and this administration is going to remain silent as the mass pew-pewing due to right-wing content, hate content, fear-mongering, conspiracies adds up again. They're going to remain silent, and they're only going to elevate and push out when somebody appears to be from the left. And we have to make sure they do not create a false narrative, because you know what? Every single person's life, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, is at risk of this kind of rage baiting.
White America is outraged, okay? Right now, a lot of white Americans are very angry. They are raging because DJT is silenced, okay? They are raging about DJT silence in the face of the right-wing violence. They are demanding answers. They are asking, why are the press conference, where are they? Why are leaders not standing with the victims? Why is this administration so quiet? Let's pause for a minute and remember something about black people, okay? I have to remind my people, this is exactly what black people have been going through for centuries. For generations, when black bodies fell, when black children were lynched, when black neighborhoods were burned down, when black churches were bombed, there was silence. Silence from presidents, silence from senators, silence from so-called defenders of democracy. You know, white America right now are watching some mass shootings unfold, okay? One after another. They are watching right-wing extremists radicalized by Trumpist conspiracies by Project 2025. Okay? In North Carolina, a white man walked into a bar by the pier with an assault rifles and opened fire, claiming that the LGBTQ community was committing genocide against straight men. He didn't come up with that idea himself. No, he did not. He consumed that idea. He drank it in from the endless well of right-wing content, from the Fox News monologues, from the Trump rallies, from the fear-mongering podcasts that tell fragile men that their existence is under threat, okay? Now, white America is asking questions like, why? Why are our leaders not speaking up? And black Americans are watching this unfold, are watching and telling them, welcome to the reality. Because this is what silence feels like. This is what denials look like. This is what black people have endured for hundreds of years. Let's watch these clips here and then we continue.
Did you guys hear that? Do you hear that? Oh, I don't either. Nothing. Nothing coming from Pam Bondi's mouth, J.D. Vance, Donald Trump, Steve Miller, about this guy. Yeah, where are they? Why aren't they having press conferences? Why aren't they standing next to the local police or the FBI office near this unaliving and holding a press conference to tell everybody that this man, this white man, consumed right-wing content, targeted a bar on a pier in North Carolina, used an assault rifle to do mass pew-pewing. 3 people lost their lives. Many more are in critical condition. He actually sued the state of North Carolina or his local city in North Carolina, claiming that the LGBTQ community is trying to commit a genocide against straight men. I wonder where he got that from. Where's Pam Bondi? Where is our Department of Justice? Where's Ted Cruz holding a press conference saying right-wing violence must stop? Innocent people must stop being targeted by people who are reading all of our conspiracies and getting triggered by our hate mongering since Donald Trump came on the scene in 2016. This is another stat that gets added to the thousands of stats since Donald Trump entered the scene of white men consuming right-wing content and then going out and unaliving a bunch of people. We all know the stats. Number one, white men. This is political violence, mostly using pew-pews. Then white young men, both of which consume right-wing content. Then below that, you have all the other men. None of them that stand out in terms of high numbers. They could be leftists. They could be mentally ill. They could be black. They could be Hispanic. But they're way below all of the white men up here who consume right-wing content. And we just added another number to it. Way at the bottom of the list that we never really have to ever worry about are women. Women. There was another shooting this morning in Michigan at a Mormon church. The shooter is down. The church was set on fire. Don't know how many people were injured. They're not releasing the name of the shooter. Something tells me that's politically motivated as well. This is just going to become commonplace. And this administration is going to remain silent as the mass pew-pewing due to right-wing content, hate content, fear-mongering, conspiracies adds up again. They're going to remain silent. And they're only going to elevate and push out when somebody appears to be from the left. And we have to make sure they do not create a false narrative. Because you know what? Every single person's life, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, is at risk of this kind of rage baiting. To hate the LGBTQ so much that he goes out and unalives people at a bar, claiming they're going to genocide straight men? He didn't get that himself. That came from Trump and Project 2025 and the whole woke, concocted narrative. Just wow. Where are they? Come on. Where are the press conferences on this shooting?
You guys, there have been 6 mass shootings in the United States in the last 24 hours. 2 were in my home state of Louisiana. One was in Alexandria. Another one was on Bourbon Street in New Orleans. And then you had the lone gunman at the Mormon church in Grand Blanc, Michigan, that decided to shoot it up and then set it on fire. Then in North Carolina, you have a man drive up on his boat to a lakefront bar and he starts shooting up the place. And the police said that this was highly, highly premeditated. I think the time that we have all been waiting for is finally here. And I think we really need to keep our heads on a swivel. I think the enemy is all around us. And I also think that we really need to question the enemy on all fronts, because in a time where all of this is happening so quickly, we really need to have critical thinking skills and look at every option and decide the truth for ourselves, because it's not always the truth that we are told.
And on this question of the algorithm, which we've heard this a lot, what this deal ensures is that the American entity and the American investors will actually control the algorithm.
And so I really pray that everyone just uses their discernment, and if things don't necessarily feel right, then maybe look into it, because that's how you're going to find the truth. You're not going to be told it. So just be careful out there, everyone. God bless, and God bless America.
That's what I'm going to tell you, because I live in America, and again, there was another mass shooting. Except this time, it's a little interesting because it happened days ago, and I never heard a word about it, and no one I talked to, no one on any of my socials had heard about anything related to this shooting. I saw a release from President Biden talking about this event. This mass shooting took place in Joliet, Illinois, several days ago, and the shooter killed 8 people and then himself. This should be national news. This should be something that we're all talking about, but it's not. because it happens so frequently here in the US. This kind of thing doesn't make news anymore. It's too commonplace. I continue to struggle with understanding how we live this way. You need to stop and listen to what is happening in the US right now.
You noticed one thing Trump isn't talking about anymore? Because you may have been distracted by his Merry Christmas to All post, where he promised to annex Panama, Greenland, and Canada, or by his attempt to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. But he sure isn't talking about the economy anymore. Is that because of the sunny fall jobs report that Biden posted? Or is it that inflation is staying under 3%? Because he's about to inherit a strong Democratic economy for the second time. Now, Trump, on the campaign trail, he never stopped about the price of groceries. But he is starting to change his tune. He is finally admitting that his taxes on goods might actually raise the price of those goods. And even further, he's hinted at some understanding that inflation will not be an easy battle, saying if they bring it down at all, quote, it won't be fast.
I'm getting increasingly annoyed at non-Americans on this app, specifically Canadians and Europeans, asking in the most condescending tone, are Americans okay? Are Americans okay? Are y'all okay? No, we're not okay. We haven't been okay for a very long time. And if you actually cared, you would be asking, how can I help? That's the only thing you need to be asking. How can I help? Our government is literally collapsing before our very eyes. And I saw it coming years ago when Donald Trump was elected. Y'all are stereotyping us all to be this minority of stupid Americans who are unlearned, uncultured, don't know anything. We know things. We're not stupid, we're not uncultured. We're having a hard time, to say the least. And some people are being genuine in their concern, asking us if we're okay, but a lot of it is just patronizing. If you want to do something, I need cash. I need money. That's what I need. I need resources. I need to be able to get out of this country in a moment's notice if it comes to it. If you actually care, call your own representatives. Call up your own government and be like, hey, you need to call out the Americans for their human rights violations over there. Because it's been going on for a long time. And this isn't just about the TikTok ban. This is about everything. Roe v. Wade was overturned. Forced birth and forced pregnancy is supposedly a human rights violation. Why hasn't any other country called that out? Our government is vilifying trans people and literally trying to, genocide them, just like they did to my own people as an Indigenous American. Our basic First Amendment rights to freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom to assemble, freedom of expression, freedom of religion are all being challenged right now. And yet the Second Amendment is somehow untouchable. And the American government just thinks that they're untouchable by the rest of the world because the rest of the world is silent about it. Are there ignorant people in America? Absolutely. I'm sure there's ignorant people everywhere. Does that mean that it's our fault that we're in this position? No. Because the government found a way to make sure that that small minority of conservatives had the biggest voice. So to answer your question, no, we're not okay. Now what are you going to do about it?
Welcome back. Let's talk about silence. Because when black people were unalived, there was silence on the air. For example, when George Floyd was unalived, there was silence until the streets were burned alive with the cries of black people, okay? When it was Brown or Taylor, there was silence until the world shouted her name. When it was Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old child, there was silence, okay? Silence has been the soundtrack of black suffering. And right now, when DJT refuses to condemn white supremacist violence, when right-wing figures refuse to hold press conferences, when the DOG doesn't race to the cameras, white America feels rage. But black people feel recognition. How? Because they know this story. They know this story and they have seen it play out again and again. That white silence protects white power. White silence excuses white terrorism. White silence gaslight the oppressed. Okay? Now, America only amplify outrage when it can be used as a political theater. Okay? For example, if a Muslim commits an act of violence, Press conference roll out in hours. Politicians fall over themselves to condemn. Policies proposals fly into Congress overnight. If a black man does something violent, media circles stretch it for weeks. They talk about culture, they talk about gangs, they talk about failed families. The outrage is national. But when a white man radicalized by right-wing extremism, suddenly the words are softer. He is mental ill, he's a lone wolf, there's no collective responsibility, and the leader vanished. So that hypocrisy is what the white lady on the first video you have heard was raging about, okay? But black people, my black Americans, brothers and sisters, don't you know about this, okay? Don't you know about this tune? Haven't you sung this song before? Haven't you been screaming for decades that this selective outrage is deadly? White America right now is finally seeing the two-tier system of response. If you are black, you get demonized. If you are them, you get excused. And now they are shocked, okay? They are shocked, but black people have been living in this shock for generations. Now, let me talk about the content of the video that first lady talked about it. For example, it was in North Carolina. North Carolina consumed right-wing content that told him LGBTQ people were genocidal, and he believed it and he acted on it. And this is not new. White men consuming violent propaganda is as old as America itself. Okay, the pamphlets that defended slavery, the sermons that preached black inferiority, the textbooks that erased African empires, the film like Birth of a Nation that painted black men as monsters to be lynched. And today, the same machine continues. Instead of pamphlets, it is social media. Instead of silent films, it is medias, influencers. So the message hasn't changed. They are coming for you. Protect yourself, attack first. That is the message. And so the mass shooting rise, hate crimes rise, political violence becomes normalized, and white America is suddenly discovering what happens when propaganda seeps into the bloodstream of society. But on the other hand, black America has always lived with the consequences of propaganda, because propaganda against black people is the foundation of the system. Now, there's another incident that happened in Michigan, at the Michigan church shootings. A church was shot up, okay? It was burned with gunfire echoing through the sacred space, And once again, silence, hesitation, a refusal to speak with the urgency. But black America remembers the church that burned in the South. Black Americans remember Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston. We remember when Dylan Roof walked in and unalived 9 praying black people. We remember the quiet response, the delayed outrage, the excuse made. So when America now experiences silence about Michigan, silence about North Carolina, they are only meeting the reality that black America has always known, okay? And this is not a new America. This is the same America. Only the violence is expanding beyond its traditional targets, Because for centuries, black people were the prime targets of white rage, of white silence, of white supremacy. But today, we have communities like LGBTQ, migrants, Jews, Muslim, and even white liberals are becoming targets. So the machine has always been the same. What's different is that who else is now consuming. And when white America gets touched by the silence, this neglect or this negligence, this selective outrage, suddenly they feel betrayed. Okay, but we must remind them that this is what black people have been going through. It is the history of black people. It is the reality of black people, okay? Because since 2016, Trump or DJT has been the amplifier. He didn't create the machine, but he put it on steroids, okay? He gave permission for the rage to come out. He elevated the conspiracy theory. He pointed fingers at the others. He made white men feel like victims, and when victims feel cornered, they lash out with violence. Even FBI reports shows it. Every statistic confirms that the largest share of domestic terrorism in America is from white men, okay? From young white men radicalized by right-wing extremists, and yet DJT is silent. Why? Because he knows they are his base. He knows condemning them condemns himself, knows that silence is complicity, but complicity is survival for him. Okay, so white America feels abandoned, but black America says this is what we have new. Okay, leaders protect the oppressor, not the oppressed. So I wanted to sit with this. The hypocrisy is being exposed not for us, but through black people. Okay, white America rage at silence is a mirror of blacks' generational trauma, but it's also an opportunity, because if America is finally seeing the double standard, if America is finally realizing that the silence is deadly, then maybe, just maybe, they are ready to listen to the black truth. Okay, because black people have always been the warning. They have always been warning. Okay, when they ignored lynches, they allowed mass shootings. When they ignored police brutality, they created militarized violence. When they ignored racial injustice, they planted the seeds of today's chaos. So black people told them that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. But you know what? They did not listen to that. And right now, their silence comes back to haunt them. Okay? And don't be deceived. Don't be deceived. White America's rage about DJT silence is not new. It is simply their first test of what black people have lived with. Okay? And as the storm rises, as right-wing violence escalates, as silence continues to shield the guilty, we as black must hold on to the truth. Black people have always been the canary of the coal mine. The sufferings of black people predicts their sufferings. That's reality. The cries of black people are ignored until they are forced to cry themselves. Okay? But you know, black people will remain to speak. They will continue to expose hypocrisy. They will continue to call out DJT. They'll call out right-wing violence, call out silence and complicity. Because if they won't learn from black suffering, then they will learn from their own. But either way, truth rises. Okay? Now, for example, when it's a black suspect, the media digs deep. They show the mugshot, they analyze the background, they speculate about gangs, about culture, or fatherless homes. So the narrative becomes cultural indictment. But when it is a white suspect, suddenly the media softens. They show the high school yearbook, a photo, They talk about mental health. They talk about how he was quiet, how neighbors are shocked. The parents talk about how good he was. Like, for example, the one that unalived Charlie Kirk. They talked about a lot of things, not that deep, okay? Not as they could talk on black. And this is what we call framing the narrative. They say, he was a good boy who just snapped. He was a Republican. He was a MAGA. He was, the way the story is told is part of the violence, because how the story is told determines how the nation feels about it. When black America screamed about George Floyd, the media initially tried to frame it as riots instead of uprising. When we demanded accountability for Taylor, they framed it as police procedure gone wrong instead of state-sanctioned murder. Right today, when a white man shoots at a bar in North Carolina, the media frames it as mental illness, as lone actor, someone with grievances. But meanwhile, they bury the part about right-wing conspiracy theories. They bury the part about Trumpist propaganda. They bury the part about the political ideology that fed him, that made him to go out there and do the shootings. Okay? White America is finally feeling the sting of that framing, and they are raging. But black America, we have lived. We know the silence. It's not just lack of speech. Silence is active storytelling that erases the truth. And history repeats itself. Okay? Let's look back. When you look back, in the Reconstruction era, after slavery, black men were elected to Congress. White America panicked. They created a Ku Klux Klan. Violence surged, lynchings became normalized, and the federal government stayed silent for decades. In the Civil Rights era, after black people marched, after we sat at counters, after we bled on bridges, white mobs bombed churches, unalived leaders and burned homes, and many government leaders looked away. Silence was the policy. In the 1990s and 2000s, a mass incarceration destroyed black communities. Politicians stayed silent about the truth, okay? That the war on drug was a war on black people. Silence protected the police. Silence protected the prisons. Silence protected the politicians who wrote the laws. And silence has always been America's response to injustice until the victims are not just black, until the violence spills over into other communities. Then suddenly outrage appears. So when white America says, "Where are the press conferences?" we answer, this is the same silence that made the pain of black people. It's just you are now living on what we have been enduring, okay? You know, Trump and his allies are silent, and it's not ignorant, okay? It's not that they don't see what's happening or incompetence. It is strategy. Silence is always a strategy, because acknowledging right-wing terrorism means admitting that the very base that fuels Trump is dangerous. It means that cutting ties with the extremists who are the loudest supporters. It means losing the energy that drives rallies, nations, and elections. Okay? So instead, they just keep quiet, and their silence fuels white rage. But the deeper truth here is, white rage is always about losing control. Okay? When slavery ended, white rage. When Jim Crow was challenged, white rage. When we elected Barack Obama, white rage. And now when right-wing violence is exposed, America global image is cracking. When America's global image is cracking, when Gen Z is rejecting whiteness as cultural standard, white rage is rising again. Okay? So Trump silence is not weakness. DJT silence is calculated. He knows rage must simmer. He knows exactly silence keep rage alive. Okay? And white America is raging because they feel abandoned. But black America have always been abandoned. Black Americans have always been left to face rage with no protection, with no justice, with no press conferences. Okay? And this is a global pattern. America is not alone. This silence is not only an American issue, it is global. Just look across the ocean. In Africa, colonial powers here in our land, they massacred the entire village. But silence in Europe, silence in America. In South Africa, apartheid lasted nearly 50 years. Silence from the West until it became economically inconvenient. In the Caribbean, when revolts happened, white nations stayed silent about the brutality but screamed about property damage to sugar plantations. Today, what's happening in the Palestine, we see silence. So when white America rages about DJT silence, we must remind them that silence is the DNA of white power. Okay? And until you dismantle it, until you confront it, silence will always be the response of your suffering, just as it has been to ours. And black people can teach America. Black people can teach America. Okay? Because black people knows how to survive. Black people knows how to resist neglect. Knows how to endure hypocrisy. Okay? When America ignored black lynchings, we built our own communities. When America ignored our pain, we wrote songs that healed us. When America ignored our struggle, we marched until they couldn't ignore us anymore. So since back then, silence has been the teacher. Silence taught black people resilience. Silence taught us unity. Silence taught us to create our own press conference, our own platforms, and our own voices. So white America is raging about silence. Maybe it is time to learn from black people. Maybe it is just time they sit at the feet of black people, understand how they survived in a world that refuses to acknowledge your humanity. Okay? You have heard that lady talk about false narrative, about how right-wing creates stories of fear. Okay? The false narrative that Africa was saving justified slavery. Because false narrative always kill. We have been having false narrative. The false narrative that Africans were savages justified slavery. The false narrative that black men were predators justified lynching. The false narrative that immigrants steal jobs fuels ICE raids and deportation. The false narrative are weapons, and DJT and his allies are masters at manufacturing fear. So when a white man consumes that fear and commits violence, silence protects the narrative. Because if they contradict, if they condemn it, they weaken their weapon. And white America is shocked by this false narrative, okay? But black people have been bleeding from them for centuries. Now, I think America is heading toward a storm, okay? Right-wing violence will increase, Trump silence will continue, political hypocrisy will deepen, media framing will protect the guilty, and ordinary people will suffer. And that's why we are saying it is heading to the fall of America. All of these things collectively, it is leading to one thing, the fall of white America, or the fall of America, okay? White America is raging, but rage without truth, it is self-destruction, and America is going to destruct itself. But as black people, let's not get distracted, okay? Let's not get seduced by the false sympathy of white America suddenly feeling the pain, okay? We don't allow them to erase our history by saying now it's happening to us, it is real. No, let's keep telling the truth. Let's keep building unity. We keep holding them accountable. We keep demanding justice, not only when it's them, but when it's us too. Because alliance or silence, because silence will not save them, and silence will not save us too. Only truth shall save everyone. Tell me what you think about that video. Until next episode, peace out.